Sarah Martinez had always been the quiet one. Growing up in a small Texas town, she was the girl who preferred books to sports, sketches to social gatherings. Her classmates often mistook her silence for weakness, her thoughtfulness for fear. Even her own family sometimes wondered if she had what it took to face the real world. At 18, when Sarah announced she was joining the military, her father nearly choked on his coffee. Her mother's face went pale. "Honey, are you sure?" her mother asked gently. "The military is so intense. Maybe you could try college first." But Sarah had made up her mind. She had watched the news, seen the conflicts around the world, and felt something stirring inside her. It wasn't anger or aggression. It was a deep need to protect others, to make a difference. She couldn't explain it to her family, but she knew this was her path. Basic training was brutal. Sarah was one of only 12 women in a group of 60 recruits. The drill sergeants seemed to take special pleasure in pushing her harder than the others. "Martinez!" Sergeant Thompson would bark. "You think this is summer camp? Drop and give me 50. While other recruits complained loudly or talked back, Sarah simply did what was asked. She never argued, never made excuses. When others were struggling with a 20-mile march, she would quietly help carry extra gear. When someone was falling behind in obstacle courses, she would stay back to encourage them. Her fellow soldiers didn't know what to make of her. Some thought she was weak because she rarely spoke up. Others assumed she was just trying to avoid attention. "She's too soft for this," whispered Private Johnson after a particularly tough training exercise. "She'll wash out in a week." But Sarah didn't wash out. Week after week, she persevered. Her shooting scores were excellent. Her physical fitness improved steadily. Most importantly, she never gave up, no matter how difficult things became. The drill sergeants began to notice, though they kept their observations to themselves. One evening, during a survival training exercise in the woods, Sarah's unit was split into small groups. She was paired with 3 male soldiers who had been among the most vocal about her supposed weakness. They were tasked with navigating through dense forest terrain to reach a checkpoint 5 miles away, using only a basic compass and map. 2 hours in, they were completely lost. The sun was setting, and tensions were running high. "This is your fault, Martinez," snapped Private Davis. "You're slowing us down with your careful pace." Sarah studied the map quietly while the others argued. She had been paying attention to small details, the direction of wind through the trees, the slope of the ground, the position of distant hills. "I think we need to head northeast," she said softly. "Nobody asked you," Davis shot back. "We're going west. That's where the checkpoint is." But as they continued west, the terrain became more difficult and the forest denser. After another hour of struggling through thick brush, they realized they were moving away from their destination. The radio crackled with warnings about dropping temperatures and the need to find shelter. It was Sarah who spotted the small cave opening, barely visible behind a cluster of rocks. It was Sarah who gathered dry wood while others were still complaining. It was Sarah who started a fire using techniques she had memorized from survival manuals. As the others warmed themselves around the flames, they began to see her differently. "How did you know about this place?" asked Private Kim, the quietest of the 3. "I was watching the rock formations," Sarah explained, "and listening to how sound echoed differently in this area. It suggested a hollow space." The next morning, Sarah led them northeast, as she had originally suggested. They reached the checkpoint exactly where she had predicted it would be. Their instructors were surprised to see them arriving from that direction, as most groups had taken longer, more difficult routes. Word began to spread about the quiet girl who had successfully navigated her team to safety. But Sarah didn't boast about it. She simply continued with her training, focused and determined as always. Months passed, and graduation approached. Sarah had quietly become one of the top performers in her class, though she still faced skepticism from some quarters. During the final evaluation, each recruit had to complete a complex obstacle course under time pressure while carrying full gear. Sarah watched as soldier after soldier attempted the course. Some were fast but sloppy, others were careful but too slow. When her turn came, she approached each obstacle methodically. She wasn't the fastest, but she was efficient. More importantly, she helped other recruits who had fallen behind, even though it cost her precious time. "Martinez!" Sergeant Thompson called as she crossed the finish line. "What the hell was that?" Sarah stood at attention, expecting criticism. "Sergeant?" "That was leadership," Thompson said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Real soldiers don't just complete missions. They make sure their team completes missions." Graduation day arrived with families cheering and proud speeches. Sarah's parents had come, still worried, but beginning to understand their daughter's strength. As she walked across the stage to receive her certification, Sarah caught sight of a tall figure in the crowd, a colonel with numerous decorations on his uniform. Colonel James Mitchell had been observing the graduation class. As the commanding officer for several elite units, he was always looking for soldiers with special potential. His eyes had been drawn to Sarah not because she was the loudest or most aggressive, but because of her consistent performance and natural leadership qualities. After the ceremony, Colonel Mitchell approached Sarah. "Soldier, I've been watching your progress. I have an opportunity that might interest you." Sarah listened as he described an upcoming joint training exercise with Navy SEALs. It would be intense, demanding, and many soldiers would not complete it. But those who did would have opportunities for specialized training and advanced positions. "I think you have what it takes," the colonel said. "But I'll warn you, these SEALs are among the toughest fighters in the world. They don't expect much from regular Army soldiers, especially women," Sarah finished quietly. "I was going to say especially newcomers," the colonel replied with a slight smile. "But yes, you'll face additional challenges. Are you interested?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." As she walked away from the graduation ceremony, her family still celebrating nearby, Sarah felt a familiar stirring inside her, the same feeling that had led her to join the military in the first place. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she was ready to prove that courage isn't always loud and strength isn't always obvious. The joint training was set to begin in 3 weeks. Sarah would spend that time in additional preparation, knowing that she would soon face the ultimate test of everything she had learned. The Navy SEALs were waiting, and they had no idea what kind of soldier was about to join their ranks. Colonel Mitchell watched her go, making a mental note to follow her progress closely. In his years of military service, he had learned to recognize true potential when he saw it. Something told him that this quiet young woman was going to surprise everyone, including herself. The Navy SEAL training facility buzzed with tension and testosterone. Sarah arrived with 15 other Army soldiers, all handpicked for this joint exercise. The SEALs had been training there for months, and their presence was unmistakable, confident, powerful, and intimidating. Chief Petty Officer Mark Razor Rodriguez was the lead SEAL instructor. He had completed 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq. His reputation for pushing soldiers beyond their limits was legendary. As the Army soldiers lined up for their first briefing, his eyes swept over them dismissively. "So these are the Army's finest," Razor said to his fellow SEALs, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's see how long they last." His gaze paused on Sarah. She was the only woman in the group standing quietly at attention, while some of the men fidgeted nervously. "Well, well," Razor continued, "looks like the Army sent us a tourist. Hope you packed comfortable shoes, sweetheart, because you'll be walking home soon." A few SEALs chuckled. Sarah's face remained expressionless, but Colonel Mitchell, who was observing from a distance, noticed her hands clench slightly. "Good," he thought. "She's got fire. She just keeps it controlled. The first test was a 5-mile ocean swim in rough waters. Sarah had trained hard for swimming, but ocean conditions were different from pool training. The waves were bigger than expected, the water colder, and the current stronger. One by one, soldiers began to struggle. "Martinez!" Razor shouted from the safety boat. "You're falling behind. Maybe you should stick to desk jobs." But Sarah wasn't falling behind. She was pacing herself, using techniques she had studied about ocean swimming. While other soldiers fought against the waves, she moved with them, conserving energy. By the 3rd mile, several soldiers had already been pulled from the water, exhausted and defeated. By the 4th mile, Sarah had quietly moved into the top 5 swimmers. She wasn't the fastest, but she was steady and strong. More importantly, when she noticed Army Private Thompson starting to panic in the rough water, she swam over to help him regain his composure and technique. "Focus on your breathing," she told him calmly as waves crashed around them. "Don't fight the water. Work with it." Thompson managed to complete the swim with Sarah's guidance. Razor watched this interaction from the boat, his expression unreadable. In SEAL training, helping others was valued, but so was individual performance. This soldier seemed to understand the balance. The next challenge was urban warfare simulation. The facility had constructed a mock city with buildings, alleyways, and multiple levels. Teams of mixed Army soldiers and SEALs had to navigate through hostile territory, rescue simulated hostages, and neutralize threats. Sarah was placed on a team with 3 SEALs who made no effort to hide their skepticism. "Just stay behind us and try not to get in the way," said Petty Officer Jackson curtly. The mission began at dawn. Sarah's team was tasked with clearing a 3-story building where enemy combatants were holding civilians. The SEALs charged in with typical aggressive tactics, but Sarah hung back, studying the situation. She noticed something others had missed: unusual scratch marks around a basement window, and the fact that hostile fire seemed to be coming from unexpected angles. While the SEALs focused on the main floors, Sarah quietly investigated the basement. What she found changed everything. There was an entire underground tunnel system that enemy forces were using to move between buildings. They weren't just holding hostages in one location, they were using a network of connected basements to stage ambushes. Sarah radioed her discovery to the team. "There's a whole underground level. The enemy is using tunnels to flank our positions." "That's impossible," Jackson responded. "The intel showed only surface-level threats." "The intel was wrong," Sarah said quietly. "I can see the tunnel entrance from here." The SEALs were skeptical, but they couldn't ignore what Sarah was reporting. She guided them through the tunnel system, using her natural sense of direction and careful observation skills. They discovered not only the hostages, but also a cache of weapons that would have been used in a major surprise attack. When the simulation ended, their team had achieved the highest success rate of any group that day. The SEAL instructors gathered to review performance footage, and Sarah's discovery of the tunnel system became a major talking point. "How did she spot that?" asked Lieutenant Commander Hayes, reviewing the video. "Our best intelligence analysts missed those signs." Razor studied the footage carefully. "She was watching details while everyone else was focused on action. That's unusual." But the real test came during the survival exercise. Teams were dropped in a harsh desert environment with minimal supplies and had to reach an extraction point 40 miles away within 3 days. The terrain was brutal: rocky hills, extreme heat during the day, freezing cold at night. Sarah's team included 2 SEALs and 1 Army soldier. The SEALs immediately took charge, setting a punishing pace across the desert. "We move fast and hard," declared Petty Officer Brooks. "Speed is life out here." But Sarah was studying the environment differently. She noticed patterns in the rock formations, signs of where water might collect, and wind patterns that could affect their route. When she suggested a slightly longer path that would provide better shelter and water sources, the SEALs dismissed her. "We don't need to take the scenic route," Brooks said sarcastically. "We're SEALs, not tourists." By the end of the first day, following the SEALs' direct route, the team was exhausted and dehydrated. They had found no water and little shelter from the blazing sun. As night fell and temperatures dropped dramatically, they realized they were in serious trouble. It was Sarah who found a small cave that provided wind protection. It was Sarah who showed them how to collect dew water using their clothing in the early morning hours. It was Sarah who identified edible plants that could supplement their limited rations. "How do you know all this stuff?" asked the Army soldier. Private Kelly, as they warmed themselves around a small fire Sarah had started using traditional techniques. "I read everything," Sarah replied simply. "Survival manuals, geology textbooks, botanical guides. You never know what information might save your life." On the second day, Brooks admitted they should follow Sarah's suggested route. She led them along paths that provided natural windbreaks and took them to a hidden spring she had predicted would be there based on the rock formations and vegetation patterns. By the third day, other teams were struggling severely. Several had already activated emergency beacons to call for rescue. But Sarah's team reached the extraction point ahead of schedule, in good health and high spirits. Colonel Mitchell was waiting at the extraction point. He watched Sarah climb out of the transport vehicle, helping her exhausted teammates despite being in better condition than any of them. The SEALs who had initially mocked her were now looking at her with unmistakable respect. "Martinez," the colonel called. She approached and stood at attention. "How do you feel?" "Ready for the next challenge, sir," she replied. Behind her, Petty Officer Brooks spoke up. "Sir, with respect, this soldier saved our mission. Maybe saved our lives. I've never seen anything like it." Colonel Mitchell nodded slowly. He had been watching Sarah's progress throughout the joint training, and what he saw confirmed his initial instincts. This quiet young woman possessed something that couldn't be taught. An intuitive understanding of strategy, environment, and leadership that was extraordinarily rare. But the biggest test was yet to come. Tomorrow would bring the final challenge, one that would push every participant to their absolute limits. It was a challenge that had broken even experienced SEALs in the past. As Sarah prepared for what lay ahead, she had no idea that by tomorrow evening she would become a legend in military training circles. Colonel Mitchell watched her with growing conviction that he was witnessing something special, a soldier who was about to redefine what everyone thought they knew about courage and capability. The final challenge was called the Gauntlet, a nightmarish combination of everything that had come before, compressed into 12 grueling hours. It began at midnight and included water obstacles, urban combat simulation, survival scenarios, and psychological pressure tests that had broken seasoned veterans. Only 8 soldiers remained from the original group, 5 SEALs and 3 Army soldiers, including Sarah. As they gathered in the pre-dawn darkness, the tension was thick. Even the SEALs looked nervous. Chief Petty Officer Razor addressed the group with unusual seriousness. "In the next 12 hours, you will be pushed beyond what you think is possible. Some of you will quit. Others will be removed for safety reasons. Those who complete the gauntlet earn a place in the most elite special operations training programs in the military." The first phase began in complete darkness, an underwater obstacle course in frigid water. Participants had to navigate through submerged barriers while carrying heavy equipment, surface for air only at designated points, and rescue simulated drowning victims. Sarah entered the water and immediately felt the shock of cold that made her muscles seize. Around her, she could hear others gasping and struggling. The first SEAL to enter, Petty Officer Morrison, was one of the strongest swimmers she had seen. But even he was having trouble with the combination of cold, darkness, and heavy gear. Sarah forced herself to stay calm and think systematically. She remembered techniques from cold water survival training and began moving in a rhythm that conserved body heat while maintaining steady progress. When she reached the first simulated victim, a weighted dummy, she noticed another participant struggling nearby. It was Army soldier Private Kelly, the same man from her desert team. He was panicking in the dark water, his movements becoming erratic and dangerous. Without hesitation, Sarah abandoned the dummy and swam to Kelly's aid. "Look at me," she said firmly, treading water beside him. "Slow your breathing. Focus on my voice." I can't see anything," Kelly gasped. "You don't need to see. Feel for my hand." Sarah guided him through the breathing techniques that would prevent hyperventilation. "Now follow my movements. We'll do this together." From the observation platform, Colonel Mitchell watched through night vision equipment as Sarah essentially sacrificed her individual performance to save a fellow soldier. Two instructors were already preparing to jump in for a rescue, but Sarah's intervention made it unnecessary. She guided Kelly through the watercourse, helping him complete obstacles he couldn't have managed alone. By the time they emerged, they were among the last to finish, but they had both completed the course. More importantly, Kelly was alive and unharmed. Razor watched them climb out of the water, his expression unreadable. "Martinez, you just lost 15 minutes helping someone else. That puts you at the bottom of the timing scores." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, standing at attention despite her exhaustion. "Do you regret that choice?" Sarah looked directly at him. "No, sir." The second phase was urban combat under extreme stress conditions. Participants had to clear buildings, while instructors used psychological pressure techniques, shouting, flashing lights, smoke, and simulated explosions to break concentration and decision-making ability. Sarah's approach was different from the others. While the SEALs relied on their training and aggressive tactics, she moved more deliberately, using the chaos as cover rather than fighting against it. She seemed to process information differently, finding patterns in the madness that others missed. In one scenario, she was tasked with locating a hidden explosive device in a building filled with decoy threats and distracting noise. Other participants had searched frantically, letting the pressure get to them. Sarah closed her eyes and listened. Behind all the artificial chaos, she heard something that didn't belong, a very faint electronic beeping that was out of sync with the other noises. Following that sound, she located the device in less than half the time it had taken anyone else. "How did you do that?" asked Petty Officer Jackson, who had been struggling with the same scenario. "I stopped trying to see everything and started listening for what was real," Sarah explained. The third phase pushed participants to their psychological breaking point. They were placed in isolation chambers with disorienting lights, sounds, and temperatures while being bombarded with questions and challenges. The goal was to maintain mental clarity and decision-making ability under extreme stress. One by one, participants began to crack under the pressure. Morrison, the strong swimmer from earlier, lasted 2 hours before requesting removal. 2 other SEALs made critical errors in judgment that ended their participation. By hour 8 of the gauntlet, only 3 people remained: Petty Officer Brooks, Private Kelly, and Sarah. In the isolation chamber, Sarah used meditation techniques she had learned during her personal studies. While others fought the discomfort, she accepted it and worked with it. She answered questions calmly and completed problem-solving tasks with steady accuracy. The final phase was the ultimate test, a solo navigation and survival scenario. Each remaining participant was dropped alone in unknown territory with minimal equipment and had to reach a specific coordinate within 4 hours, avoiding detection by tracking teams along the way. Sarah found herself in dense forest terrain at dawn. She had a basic compass, a map with limited detail, and the knowledge that trained tracking teams were hunting for her. The other participants had been dropped in different areas, so this was purely individual performance. She began by studying the terrain and the map carefully. Rather than moving immediately, she spent precious minutes understanding the landscape and planning multiple routes. She noticed that the most obvious path to her destination would take her through open areas where tracking teams could easily spot her. Instead, she chose a longer route through denser forest that offered better concealment. Her training and observation served her well. She could spot signs of the tracking team's movements and adjust her path accordingly. More than once, she had to change direction when she detected pursuit. But it was her understanding of human psychology that gave her the biggest advantage. She realized that the tracking teams would expect participants to move as quickly as possible toward the destination. So Sarah did something unexpected. She initially moved in the opposite direction, creating false trails, then doubled back through areas the trackers had already cleared. With 1 hour remaining, Sarah was still 2 miles from her destination. Other participants might have panicked and made risky moves. Instead, she continued to move methodically, using every piece of cover and concealment she could find. She reached the coordinates with 12 minutes to spare, having completely evaded detection. As she approached the extraction point, she was surprised to find Colonel Mitchell waiting alone. "Where are the others?" she asked. "Brooks was captured by the tracking team an hour ago. Kelly activated his emergency beacon after getting lost in a ravine," the colonel replied. "Congratulations, Martinez. You're the only participant to complete the gauntlet." Sarah stood quietly for a moment, processing this information. In all the years the gauntlet had been conducted, very few participants had ever completed it successfully. To be the only one in this group, and to have beaten some of the Navy's most elite SEALs, was almost unbelievable. "How do you feel about that?" Colonel Mitchell asked. "I feel ready for whatever comes next, sir," Sarah replied. The colonel smiled. "What comes next is a choice. You've proven yourself beyond any doubt. I'm offering you a position in a special operations unit that handles the most sensitive and challenging missions. It's dangerous work, but I believe you're uniquely qualified for it." As they walked back toward the main facility, Colonel Mitchell reflected on what he had witnessed. In all his years of military service, he had never seen a soldier who combined technical skill, psychological resilience, and natural leadership the way Sarah did. She hadn't just completed the gauntlet, she had redefined what was possible. Word of Sarah's achievement spread quickly through military circles. The quiet girl from Texas, who had been underestimated by everyone, had just outperformed Navy SEALs in the most demanding test the military had to offer. But for Sarah, this wasn't about proving others wrong or seeking recognition. As she called her parents that evening to share the news, her mother's voice was filled with amazement and pride. "I always knew you were strong, honey. I just never imagined—" "I know, Mom," Sarah said quietly. "Sometimes the strongest courage is the kind that doesn't need to announce itself." Colonel Mitchell was already making plans for Sarah's future assignments. He had witnessed something extraordinary, a soldier who proved that true strength comes not from aggression or bravado, but from intelligence, determination, and an unshakable commitment to doing what's right. In the months that followed, Sarah would go on to complete missions that seasoned special operations veterans found challenging. Her unique approach to problem-solving and her ability to remain calm under pressure would save countless lives and complete operations that others deemed impossible. But none of her future achievements would be more significant than this moment, when a young woman who had been consistently underestimated showed the world that courage comes in many forms, and the quiet ones are often the strongest of all.